Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you've all got a little bit of breakfast with you there, although it's a bit late for breakfast actually, so, well, depends what time you eat breakfast. But good morning. Welcome to the Azure Virtual Desktop Windows 365 and Citrix seminar. Thank you so much for attending this morning. So just a little bit about how this session is going to be run. Most of you have realized already that some of you, or you will all be muted, but you can submit questions at any time via the questions box on the right hand side of your screen, or by emailing tellmemore@bytes.co.uk. Please do keep those questions coming in. It's quite a small group today, and we want it to be interactive. We want to hear what kind of questions you have. We've got experts from across the board on the call, so if there's any sort of question that you haven't been able to get an answer to so far, any like burning questions that you've got on your mind, please do pop them in the box because they'll be useful for other people on the call as well, no doubt. There's a Q&A session at the end as well if you want to ask your questions in that forum to everyone. And yeah, as I've already mentioned to someone earlier today, the seminar will be recorded and it will be made available to you later today. So that's just a consideration if you were going on camera or anything like that. It is being recorded and it will be sent out. And lastly, please complete the survey at the end. You can request callbacks and things like that through that, but we'd be really interested to get some feedback as to how you think the session was run and if it was valuable to you and things like that. So moving on, introducing who we've got on the call today. We've got Toby Brown. He's from Microsoft, a senior AVD specialist and sits in the global black belt team. We've got Danny Clark. He's the lead sales engineer at Citrix. Myself, I'm an Azure Solutions Specialist at Bytes. Pete Ely, if he's managed to join, I know he was running slightly behind, but he's the Modern Workplace lead at Bytes, so he heads up that team. And we've got Chris Spear, who is one of the Cloud Solutions Architects at Bytes. So what are we going to discuss today? Really, it's an overview of W365, Azure Virtual Desktop, and Citrix Workspace. We're going to have a discussion around Azure Virtual Desktop deployment, some of the considerations and challenges that organizations have to face, some of the trade-offs that you're going to have to make, and some of the things that you're going to have to go and ask your business to be able to go and do a successful rollout of any of these when you're considering that project. We're going to take a look at Citrix Workspace in depth. Danny's going to walk us through that and show us sort of in depth how Citrix Workspace is deployed and some of the technology that goes behind that. And then lastly, some of the Bytes value adds and where we can help with all three of those points above. So hopefully that should cover the sort of entire breadth of VDI using Azure and Citrix, and then also where Bytes work with organizations to be able to help them unpick that and sort of build meaningful projects out of that. So without further ado, it's over to Toby. Toby, I've introduced you a little bit there, but I know you've got some slides to share. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Chris. And just to confirm, you can see my slides. Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, thanks for introducing me. So I'm Toby Brown. I'm senior specialist in our AVD global black belt team. Put simply, that means I talk to customers and partners and join webinars to talk about Azure Virtual Desktop, or what was Windows Virtual Desktop. And today, I'm going to be doing something slightly different, just to sort of cover off the agenda that we spoke about earlier on. So I will be talking about Azure Virtual Desktop and giving you an overview of that and some of the more in-depth sort of implementation steps that you want to look at. But I'll also be covering Windows 365, which was a sort of marquee announcement recently from Microsoft. It's just gone GA, etc., and it's getting a lot of attention in the industry, because I think Microsoft have decided to kind of create a new category of computing. But I want to position hopefully both for you so that you understand when one is more appropriate over the other, what the limitations are of one and what the benefits are of each. And I'll also be covering, I used to work for Citrix, so I worked for Citrix for 6 years until I started in the AVD team. So we're going to be discussing there the value add that Citrix bring atop Azure Virtual Desktop, because I'm sure many of you look at Azure Virtual Desktop and ask, is this a replacement for Citrix? And it's very much that's not the case. The case is Citrix bring a lot of value to that solution and showing how it can augment it. And I'll bring in Danny at that point, and we'll sort of have a bit of a chat about some of the capabilities that Citrix offer in that field. So first, just some of the sort of the slides about where we are, because we're emerging from this pandemic, and we're definitely seeing a shift in the way that work has to happen now. So we're into this new world of what we're referring to as hybrid work, because as we can see from some of the statistics that are on the screen, 3/4 of workers say they want more flexible remote working options. I onboarded to Microsoft during a pandemic, so I know how tough that can be to be in the house. But what helped me was having the collaboration tools like Teams, etc., like SharePoint Online, and to allow me to onboard quickly. And as we can see there as well, 2/3 of employees are looking, despite wanting more remote work options, they are wanting to have more in-person collaboration, which creates this kind of dichotomy as well, because this hybrid work dichotomy, and we've also got managers that are expecting, most managers now expecting they're going to have to design flexible work from home policies in a post-pandemic world. And this is what we're calling the sort of hybrid work paradox, because organizations everywhere, they're having to adapt to this growing need to support these hybrid work policies, but there's still these business challenges that have to be dealt with, elastic workforces, seasonal workers, company-owned devices or bring your own devices, which ones are you going to use, interns, contractors, but also those sort of higher use cases like how do we allow software developers or designers or engineers to work from home? How do we deliver these agile, resilient solutions when we are probably in the most complex cybersecurity landscape that we've ever seen in terms of people working from home and the threat that poses? So whilst it creates new opportunities, we're also seeing new challenges. Things are different now. IT aren't now going to be down the hall from employees when they need help. Employees like myself, need to be onboarded into distributed teams, but they still need to remain connected. They need to work on specialised workloads, but IT needs to do this whilst ensuring that they meet sort of the ever-changing regulatory requirements. And I think we're going to see a lot more new regulations and requirements that come out that businesses need to adhere to support these new remote workers, this hybrid work. So how can we do this without overburdening IT? And how can we do it without letting costs kind of spiral out of control or having to sacrifice productivity or compromise on security? So that's where Azure Virtual Desktop comes in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and keep referring to Azure Virtual Desktop as a platform. And it's a platform that we see that sort of enables all these hybrid workforce solutions. So the thing to know about Azure Virtual Desktop, or the number one thing I always like to explain is, most customers will probably already have it. It's not a product as such, it's an entitlement. So, if you are an M365, E3, E5 customer, if you're already bought into the Microsoft M365 methodology, then you are already entitled to work with this. So I've got one customer, and I spoke to them recently about how they ramped up and how they could deploy Azure Virtual Desktop so quickly. They were at a university, and they said to me, well, we were already there, we're already entitled to use it. We didn't have to go through a procurement exercise as such to be able to deploy this technology to ramp up to support our workforces during COVID. Obviously we had a consumption element to it, but that was, that was accepted. But from a licensing perspective, we were able to get going very quickly, and they brought in a partner to help them scale that up. But the key thing here is, if you are an M365 customer, you are already entitled to use this. And essentially, all we did with AVD was unlocked some of the licensing complexity that that meant that when you deploy desktops in a public cloud solution, it became really cumbersome, really complex from a licensing standpoint. And we just kind of unlocked that all and said it made it easy to say that if you have these licenses that are on screen, you can deploy a desktop for your users and just pay for the consumption of the compute as you go along. What does it look like? Well, it's a platform as a service solution. So whilst when we talk about Windows 365, I see that more as a software as a service solution. Azure Virtual Desktop is very much a platform that we've built, because whilst we speak about this entitlement, you have an entitlement to deliver a desktop in the cloud. We had to stand up a platform as a service solution that allowed these desktops to be consumed, and that's what we built. And I would say, from being involved with AVD from the start, it was actually very closely modelled on what Citrix had already built. So Citrix built Citrix Cloud as a way to deliver a platform as a service solution to deliver applications and desktops from the cloud and from on-premises. And when we launched AVD, it was built very similarly to the way that was built in terms of the components that were there. So you can see there in the middle, the components that we built and that we offer a service. We provide the clients, we give you the diagnostic capabilities, we provide the remote access, but we also provide the management, the brokering, and the load balancing. So you don't have to worry about any of that when you deploy AVD. At the bottom, the infrastructure, so that's Azure Infrastructure as a Service. So we provide the compute, the storage, and networking. Again, you just set your workloads on top of that. But you have to bring your M365 subscription. You have to bring that. Your M365 subscription. You have to bring your Azure subscription as well for standing up the workloads. But the rest of it is provided as a sort of platform as a service by Microsoft as well. When deploying desktops in the cloud or on premises, before AVD launched, there was two options. You could deliver Windows 10 Enterprise, so a single session, one user, one machine, commonly referred to as VDI, or you could deliver a Windows Server experience. That Windows Server experience we tried to make look like a Windows desktop operating system, but essentially it was a Windows Server operating system underneath. Windows Server gives you great scalability because multiple users can log into a single machine, which means that it scales well, whereas Windows 10 Enterprise doesn't scale as well because you have one user, one VM as such, but it gives you better compatibility. Now, the main product aspect that was delivered as part of AVD was a new version of Windows 10. And forgive me if you already know this, but I think it's important. Windows 10 multi-session is a version of Windows that sits between these two. So it provides you the compatibility of Windows 10 because it is Windows 10. If you imagine the top half of it, the user sees is Windows 10, but the bottom half of it, that's all the sort of the bits and bobs, that is actually Windows Server-like. So what that means is you can get multiple users can log into the same Windows 10 instance. So you get the application compatibility of Windows 10, which sometimes Windows Server couldn't offer, but you get somewhere near the scalability of Windows Server. So it's this great kind of third option for delivery of a desktop to users that we're seeing massive traction with in terms of AVD, and it's unique to AVD. You cannot deliver this in an AWS or a GCP or on premises. The only way you can deliver this great new version of Windows 10 is by deploying AVD via either Microsoft natively or by deploying it via Citrix as well. And the thing is, as well, with Azure Virtual Desktop, it's built around all of our Azure tools and practices and all the security elements that you would normally get from the Microsoft ecosystem. So it works seamlessly with Microsoft 365 and conditional access, multi-factor authentication. It's hosted obviously in the global footprint we have in the Azure data centers, and we spend, $1 billion annually in cyber security. So that's security of our data centers, that's security of our hypervisors, of everything that's in our data center, the virtual networking security. we spend that money on that. We have red teams and blue teams that are constantly trying to attack and defend Azure. And the reason I call that out is that's, that is data center security that is nigh on impossible for most organizations to deliver themselves. So trust Microsoft to, host those workloads, and we will protect them with the investment that we put into them. I'm not even going to claim that this slide is up to date. This is one of my colleagues has put this together, and I keep meaning to try and grab the latest version and keep forgetting. But essentially what you're seeing is the sort of points of presence for where we can host our points of presence for remote access, for where the gateways are. We can also see the gateways that are on the roadmap, where we host the metadata for AVD. But the key point here is when you use AVD or any Microsoft service, you have a global presence that is just unparalleled in terms of data center capabilities, data center locations, in terms of networking. I think, and I'll caveat this, but the last time I checked, we are the second largest provider of networking infrastructure across the globe, second only to AT&T or somebody like that. So we have that presence around the world that's just really, really, really important if you're delivering applications or you're delivering desktops to your end users. If you can get them as close as possible to where they are, then they are going to have a better experience because the latency will be lower. But yes, that slide gets out of date very fast, very quickly. So the crux of this is I'm going to talk through some of the considerations you'll have when you're looking at Azure Virtual Desktop or you're looking at implementing this. So there are some initial requirements you have to think about. And again, hopefully you'll get an idea for, when we get to the Windows 365, you'll see some of the elements of Windows 365 where these things aren't a concern, but if you are building AVD, it is cloud-based VDI, so you do have infrastructure requirements. So you have to carefully consider your networking requirements. If you're going to put all your domain controllers in Azure and all your servers and everything, then great. You don't need any. If you don't need any on-premise connectivity back into your data centers, really simple to do. If you do, then you're obviously going to have to think about how you're going to connect Azure into your on-premises networks, and is that going to be through ExpressRoute, or is that going to be through site-to-site VPNs, etc.? What does your network topology going to look like? And we also have this concern about how you're going to authenticate your users as well. Now, the whole world is shifting to cloud-based identity, cloud-based services, etc. But we are in this state of flux of, there's still a lot of Active Directory out there. I did my first Active Directory course in the year 2000, and we're 21 years on, and it's still, the predominant directory source in the world at the moment. So there is a consideration here. So if you are an organization that is fully cloud, then we have the capability for you to you don't have to deploy domain controllers. You can use Azure AD domain services. You can use native Azure AD, has just launched in public preview at the moment. So if you just want to use pure Azure AD, you can. You can join your workstations into Azure AD. There's a lot of caveats around it at the moment because it's a private preview. But the idea here is we're moving from, this dependency on on-premises Active Directory into supporting the pure cloud play. And over the next 18 months, you'll see more and more from Microsoft from a pure Azure AD cloud play without any dependency on Active Directory. But for organizations that are still wedded to Active Directory, then you are in good standing at the moment, because we do have the tools and processes to be able to link Azure Virtual Desktop into that on-premises Active Directory. If you've got ADFS deployed, we can even provide single sign-on, etc. And I'm sure Danny will talk about FAS later on that Citrix have got that provides a similar solution as well. But if you've got Active Directory, you've got connectivity into Azure, then you're good, you're ready to go, you're ready to get your identity requirements sorted out. Now, one of the missing components that was always a problem, and Danny will know this. You know, anyone who's been dealing with virtual desktops for a while, was trying to deliver a non-persistent type experience, or trying to manage profiles. It was always a complex task, and most vendors had their preferred solution that they either acquired and then integrated into product. Microsoft no different. So delivering desktops from Azure was always a problem in terms of providing a supported profile management solution for profiles in the cloud, for Office 365 caches, for OneDrive for Business, etc. So Microsoft a few years ago went out and bought the best on the market at the time, that was FS Logics. FS Logics use a VHD container-based approach, which means that profiles are stored in a supported format from Microsoft perspective, because they are stored in block level on disk. Doesn't matter that that disk is on a network share, but essentially we went out, we bought, you know, what was the industry leader in solving this problem for Office 365 in the cloud, and we've now integrated that into the solution. We provide it to all customers free of charge now, as long as they've got the correct enterprise agreements in place. But we bought it with the sort of the real kind of need to solve this problem of caching Office in the cloud and things like that, and providing non-persistent VDI in the cloud. So FS Logics is integrated, and what we're doing with it is we're trying to abstract two things. So what we're trying to do is we're abstracting profiles. So profiles are no longer a problem, they're abstracted, they're mapped in as and when required. And we're using the same technology as well to try and deliver applications as well. So we have a newish technology called MSIX App Attach. But the basic premise here is detach the applications from the image, map them in as and when required, do the same for profiles, which means you don't have to worry too much about installing lots into the master image as such. We can layer everything in an as and when required basis. Getting started with Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, obviously, you can deploy from the portal. That's what I do a lot, because I'm not an automation god in any sort of shape or form. But if you have PowerShell skills in your organization, or you have any sort of programming skills, we have different capabilities. The portal, PowerShell, Azure CLI, which is a standalone command line interface that you can use to deploy these components, RESTful API components, Terraform, Bicep. Any of these infrastructures or code solutions can be used to deploy anything, and we do that through an abstraction layer we have called the Azure Resource Manager, so ARM. We have our own templates as well, so you can build your own templates and deploy them through the portal, through this. Whichever way you want to deploy Azure Virtual Desktop, whichever tool set you're comfortable with, you can do with AVD. Concepts. Now, there's not a lot of constructs and concepts within AVD. Terminology you have to get yourself used to. Obviously, you have a subscription. Within that subscription, you have the concept of a workspace. That workspace is just where your metadata is held. So if you want to host, you want to make sure for compliance reasons none of your metadata exists outside of the EU, then if you create your workspace within one of the EU regions or in the UK, you can be sure that all of your metadata and information is stored within that region. We have the concept of a host pool. A host pool is just a group of machines. If you know Citrix, it's a machine catalog. It's just our terminology for it. It's just a grouping of machines with the same operating system, the same spec, etc., that will be used to deliver desktops and applications. We have an app group. An app group is just where you then assign users to, so that you either get a desktop app, which is not the greatest terminology, or an application app. So you basically got this concept of a desktop being published as an application, or applications being published as standalone applications as well. And session hosts. Session hosts are just the workers. So they're just the workers that sit in the host pool. They're just standard VMs that can run in any of the sort of template t-shirt sizes we have in Azure as well. So these are the sort of names you'll see that get sort of thrown about in terms of deploying Azure Virtual Desktop. I think as I alluded to earlier on, if you are if you are an organization that is well versed in automating stuff, then you will have, you know, great success with AVD, because you can use the ARM templates I spoke about. You can use Azure DevOps pipelines, Bicep, which is a newish infrastructure as a code service from Microsoft, Terraform, etc. All of these can be used to automate every aspect of your AVD lifecycle, from image creation to host pool creation to host pool maintenance to host pool destruction, etc., to provisioning users. You can automate everything within AVD. Some sizing recommendations. I'm not going to spend too long here. What I would say is you know, when customers ask me how many users will I get on a machine, I will say you'll get how many users on a machine that you will get on a machine before it starts to collapse. Now that could be, you know, you may not get these figures because some of your applications may be heavier than others. You may be a full-on Teams user. You know, these might have been done against a light Teams user. All I would say is the point here is you have to test. So load users onto your machines, check how the performance is, get them to run their common application control set. Just make sure you test everything here and work out where your sweet spots would be. But this is just the sort of initial guidance that if you're looking at, say for example, I would say if you're a Teams user, I would put you in at heavy. So you can see there, if you get a Teams user and you're going to use full video and audio in that, assign that user in the heavy profile and build out your instances and build out your number of users there. But there is plenty of community advice out there. There's plenty of guidance from Citrix as well in terms of, you know, how you optimize it, how you deliver it, how you size it, etc. But what I would say is if you don't get close to these figures, then, or you get slightly more, don't be concerned about it, because you will get on a box what you get on a box. Managing images. So, you know, again, when Danny comes on to talk about the Citrix value add, they will talk about how they can do image management and sort of single image and rollout through MCS or provisioning services. Now, we have the capability to manage images. You can use, you know, things like System Center Configuration Manager to manage your golden image, third-party tools, etc. But we don't have a sort of one-stop shop for delivery of this. We depend on aspects of the wider Azure portfolio to help you, again, with the automation, the DevOps pipelines for creating images, etc. Azure Image Builder for building images using Packer from HashiCorp. You know, we draw on different elements of Azure to give you a tool set that you can use to do it, but you have to design the tools and processes yourself. Whereas the value add the likes of Citrix will have is providing you with a single kind of one-stop shop for doing image management. But if you have got a well-tested SCCM capability, there's no reason you can't continue to use that or another tool set to manage your master images. Patch management, the same. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Needless to say, it has to be done. So one of the most common ways I've heard users doing it are just destroying host pools on a monthly basis and rebuilding them over the weekend. Again, all automated with the new set of updates. Some customers will wait for a new template image to arrive in the Azure gallery and use that as the basis of the latest updates. But needless to say, once our host pools are stood up, then they are standalone instances. So you could let them run forever. You could patch them yourself, just have them running from Windows Update. But then their configurations will you start to drift as well. So obviously we recommend that you look to update and rebuild them and implement your own sort of scheduling cycle for that. But there's no sort of golden rule here. Whatever works for you in terms of how you patch your traditional endpoints, I would say use that, you know, come to AVD with that patching mindset. And if you want to change it through some of the tools you see there, then change it. But don't feel you have to toss away what's there. Profile management, well, we spoke about this. You know, profiles we now store in FSLogix containers. We can store them on an Azure file share. We've got full integration there. We can store it on a NetApp filer running in Azure as well. So again, you've just got to make sure that you design the underlying storage with the right kind of capacity to be able to deliver those profiles. But once they are deployed, you will see extremely fast logon times. You know, these are much better. You'll be able to roam between operating systems, roam between host pools if you want as well. And it's a really nice user experience, and there's some great disaster recovery elements within FSLogix as well, Cloud Cache, which provides you a level of resilience. So if there is a problem, if there is an Azure outage, which sometimes happens, you can actually deploy technologies within FSLogix that actually allow containers to persist and continue to write until the file share comes back as well. So always plan for the worst case scenario, but there are tools within the portfolio to help with that as well. First time I saw this slide, I didn't know what it meant. I'm still not 100% sure about everything that's on screen, but the key thing to note here is RDP has improved. I've got a slide on it later on as well, but for many years I just viewed RDP as it was an admin. I used it for when I wanted to jump on servers and to sort of do some work on a server, RDP into it as such. But that protocol has obviously got better and better over time. And again, I'll wait to show you the slide later on that's got some of the improvements in it. I wouldn't say it's as good as Citrix's protocol and Citrix's HDX protocol, but it's certainly good enough for most use cases. Maybe on really choppy links with high packet loss, high latency, Citrix is really in its element there. But if you've got broadband users in the house, with a good connection, then you'll find that the improvements that have been made into RDP really is becoming a great protocol. And we have all the work that we're doing to optimize and deliver a rich video experience in it as well. So things like Teams optimization, which Citrix have, and we have a sort of subset of the capabilities as well. As time progresses, we will get to a point where Teams delivery inside a virtual desktop will be as seamless as accessing it natively. We're not there at the moment. We're engineering out a lot of those features. Citrix are engineering out a lot of those features as well. But at some point in the future, I think Teams delivery will get to a point where it's on par with what you can do when running the Teams client natively as well. I'm just looking at how I am for time. Anyone want to give me a time check? Because I'm only about halfway through. But worth noting as well, you don't have to, it's not just about delivering Windows 10 multi-session. You can deliver all those three elements. Windows 10 Enterprise, that might be the best option for your chief exec. Windows 10 multi-session for your kind of knowledge workers, but you may want to deliver Windows Server still under this entitlement, because you'll get the best kind of scalability in Windows Server as well. If you've got people that just maybe need Office, maybe they just need a browser as such, and they're just doing very light task-based stuff, then maybe deliver them a desktop through a server-based operating system. And again, use the use cases. You do have access to all those three that I showed you up front. So consider them all and see which one's going to be the best for you in delivery. And I actually spoke to a customer yesterday who's still running Windows 7. They're paying for the extended security support from Microsoft at the moment. If you move that workload, that Windows 7 VDI workload into Azure, we will give you extended security updates for, I think, another 18 months now. I think it was 3 years from end of life. So if you're looking for kind of get out of jail card whilst you're still transitioning to Windows 10, then do consider that those extended security updates that we're providing in Azure as well. Some basic performance guidance, try and keep VMs as close as possible to where your users are, and the locations, try and keep an Active Directory domain controller there. Multi-session, you get the best kind of density for the most cost effectiveness, but it's always going to be a balance between those. Try different VM sizes, see which one you get the best user density on and which one gives you the best kind of cost per user ratio as well. And at peak logon times, we recommend trying to change your load balancing algorithms as well. So at peak logon times, you may want to drop users onto different boxes rather than load them up onto the same box as we go along. It's not the most cost-effective option, but it'll give you the best performance as well. But again, tons and tons of guidance out there from our partners like Bytes, etc., on how to do this and how to make it work for you as well.
Toby, just really quickly, you asked for a time check there. It's currently 10:40, so about 10 more minutes, I'd say you've got in the slot.
Yeah, that should go. I'll maybe just whiz through the last ones for that.
I can talk quick on my bits as well, Toby, so carry on doing a cracking job.
Okay, I'll forget about Outlook. Outlook's been redesigned to be a lot more VDI friendly. This one I love. OneDrive for Business now, just as soon as you log into it now, it will try. You can set as a policy now that it'll back up important data, so desktop documents, photos. So rather than do folder redirection, if you set a policy in OneDrive for Business, it will just back up everything into OneDrive. You're entitled to it if you're using AVD. Makes it really simple, and it means you don't have to worry about capturing that data when a user's roaming, because as long as they have good internet connectivity, which they will because they're in Azure, then when they log into any machine, they will have their OneDrive data available to them. Okay, so some of the considerations for AVD. Now we'll come on and talk about Windows 365. So with Windows 365, and we've created what we like to call a new sort of category of computing, and we're talking about the cloud PC. A cloud PC is different to VDI. I'm trying to think the easiest way to describe it, but it's a kind of, we're trying to create a familiar and productive experience for users so that wherever they go, they've got access to everything they need to be able to do their job. We're trying to make it secure by design, obviously. We're trying to make it available on all devices and optimized. We're trying to give the best possible PC-like experience, and you keep hearing me say this, PC-like experience to our users wherever they are. And we're trying to do it in a way that's resilient to the ever-changing needs of a workforce. So the goal is to make Windows 365 to be loved by all our end users, to be trusted by IT, and to deliver simplicity, versatility, and security needed for hybrid work. What we're giving to end users, we're giving them a PC that basically is instantly available to them. Now, a VDI instance, when you log into it, you have to wait. You can make it quick, you can make it rapid, you can make it longer. But I have an organization that said to me, we want that instant kind of MacBook, Surface Book, open it up and it's instantly available. That's what you get with Cloud PC. It will be with you wherever you are, so as long as you've got internet connectivity, it'll be there, and it'll always be in the same state as where you left it, because it's always on. For IT, that means we're giving them a really simplified procurement model, because we're changing the way it's procured. So rather than Azure Virtual Desktop, which has a variable consumption-based aspect on how much compute, a cloud PC is one cost per month per user per month. But it has the same principles as AVD. It's secure by design. It sort of embodies our zero trust kind of strategy that we're building out at the moment. And you can leverage the rest of your Windows investment with it. So it's built in, the capabilities for like Windows Defender, Azure AD, M365 apps, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. These are all provided as part of the solution as well, because again, you're entitled to them as part of M365. So it integrates with these to give the best possible experience. And we're trying to position a solution here that doesn't need previous virtualization experience, so VDI experience. Now, there's still setup, there's still stuff that has to be done, but these are one-time tasks. After that, you really shouldn't need to have virtualization skill sets to be able to manage your cloud PCs, because it's all done through Microsoft Endpoint Manager. I'll skip this one. This is just some of the requirements on the license types, the fact that you do need an Azure subscription, but these things will become sort of apparent as we sort of move forward. So what's available? Well, you've got the choice of clients. Same clients that support AVD, so you can Mac, Windows, iOS, Android all work. There's a web client, which is very good as well. Windows 10 is Windows 10 Enterprise, not Windows 10 multi-session. So it's one user, one VM. So that's why it's the most personal experience possible. Windows 11 will be available when it GAs. And you can see the t-shirt sizes that you get at the bottom as well. So it's predictable per user monthly costs. AVD is very much a variable cost aspect. Again, pinch of salt in these ones, but these are what we're recommending as some of the t-shirt sizes and the kind of users they'll support. So you can see the one VCP option, again, very, very, very lightweight, no Teams, no nothing, maybe just a browser, maybe the Office apps delivered via a browser, not the full fat ones. But you can see there as we move up, Teams audio only, Teams, fuller Teams coming in at the 2 vCPU 8 gig option as well. So, you know, it's different to AVD. As we go up, the costs increase as well. But what you might find is it suits a use case. And AVD and Windows 365 can be mixed and matched. Again, I sort of alluded to this earlier on. We've seen a lot of improvements in RDP. You know, the key thing to take away here is not a lot happened for 12 years, 12 features in 8 years. But in the last 5 years, we've seen that sort of double. So there's a lot of innovation coming to RDP, which is the native protocol for Windows 365. It adheres to all our zero trust principles as well. So you're storing everything in the cloud, you know, so everything's secured in our data centers. You know, your identities in Azure AD, you're managing through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you're using things like Defender. By default, no one's an administrator as well. You can change that. But again, we're making this a secure by design solution that you can use to enable things like bring your own computer. So last kind of 5-6 slides, just how does it compare to Azure Virtual Desktop? And again, I think you'll see we've had these we've spoken about these earlier on, evolving needs for our workforce now, common challenges that we're seeing across all of these. Now, the key thing here is AVD and Windows 365 should be considered almost a joint solution that enable all of this. So this is our cloud-based end user computing statement. We can deliver desktops to any device. We have the built-in security and analytics, etc. We have cloud agility and scale, and we have flexible pricing options. So if you want to deliver, you want variable options, or you want low-cost options, or you want a standard fixed cost for users, AVD and Windows 365 together can deliver all of these for you. So AVD, we're very much positioning as an alternative to on-premises VDI. If that's what you deployed before, then deploy Cloud VDI. It's a platform that delivers the most flexibility and agility for delivery of desktops and apps. Now, on the other hand, Windows 365, we very much see that as delivering what we call the Cloud PC. So it's a completely SaaS service that securely delivers your Windows desktop, all your applications, all your settings and content from the Microsoft Cloud to any device. So again, full SaaS platform as a service for AVD is such that you can build upon. Some of the sort of unique capabilities of each. So if you want to do application streaming, you have to, if you want to deliver just an application, that has to be done through AVD or AVD plus Citrix. If you want full control over the configuration management, or you want to use a third-party tool for deployments, for managing it, then you need AVD. If you want Citrix and VMware support, you need AVD. If you want flexible consumption-based pricing, it's AVD. On the other hand, if you're quite happy with Endpoint Manager, or you want an end-to-end service from ourselves, if you just want a personal desktop, or you want predictable user pricing, that is more suitable for Cloud PC as well. Be aware that Cloud PC, and in fact this will show it, the Azure, if we look at the AVD architecture just at a very high level, you can see there what we have in the customer tenant. The virtual machines run there, the user profiles are in there, the images they're using are there, there's a virtual network, there's Active Directory, the services we provide in the middle, and the clients on the right hand side. What we do with Windows 365 is we provide those. So we take the management of those VMs, because the VMs run in our subscriptions. The user profiles are stored in our subscriptions. The images are stored in our subscription. We provide all these services around it, from management and packaging and APIs and portals, etc. But then what we do is we stretch the network. We take the network and we stretch it into your Azure virtual network. So your presence, the virtual machine, sits on your virtual network, but the management of it and everything else is taken care of by Microsoft. So you can see there the evolution from platform into software as a service. And in the future, you will actually be able to take away the virtual network, Active Directory, because you'll be able to use Azure AD. So you'll be able to almost stand up the entire thing as a service in the future. But it uses the AVD architecture, so it uses the platform that's there, the remote access components, etc., the gateways. It uses that same, it's built upon that same platform that AVD uses. It's just a service that we drag more and more of our capabilities into. So just make sure, when you're considering it, you look at the right solutions. Now, we've gone through some of the benefits of each, but there's options from a fully SaaS service, from a basic service that we offer, into the sort of premium extra value add service that Citrix offer by building on top of. But make sure you consider what's right. Look at try and map the business requirements to the solutions provided to see which one fits your needs best. So, Citrix. So I worked there for many years. Citrix always, oh, Danny's got, he's looking awfully smart.
That's the first time in a year and a half I've got a suit on.
You look like Harry Hill, I've just noticed. So think about the native Azure Virtual Desktop platform, and think about Citrix bringing their unique value add and building on top of it. So at Citrix, they always spoke about security, choice, experience, bringing all those elements together, adding it on to the platform that was there, just like they did with RDS, to provide the sort of more fuller featured, more enterprise capable platform. So that's where Citrix have always offered the value. How they do that? So this is one of my old slides from when I was at Citrix. So rather than use the control plane that we provide in blue at the top, what Citrix do is they swap in, they bring Citrix Cloud in, and that allows them to offer the same, offer their extended capabilities, but still with the same elements below. So it's still your subscription, it's still your entitlement, but it allows them to build upon that and offer their value, and to take advantage of things like the multi-session Windows 10, which is a unique offering for us. When we swap in, bring in the Citrix control plane, they are authorized to be able to deliver those capabilities, including to that operating system. Now, this is a wonderful next diagram. So this kind of shows you what Azure Virtual Desktop looks like natively. So we've got our subscription, we've got our VMs running in there. They only run in the Azure subscription. We're reaching back to our on-premises, but just purely for identity and things like that. And we've got our very sort of well-defined capabilities. When we bring in Citrix, and I'll bring in Danny here, this is where we start to bring in the value. So Danny, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I think good point to jump in. So what we're doing, what this slide's representing, is exactly what Toby said. We're taking two of the three core tenets of AVD, which is the subscription capabilities themselves, the workloads, the licensing entitlements, all that great stuff. We're kind of pushing their control plane to one side and leveraging our own. So, and within that, within Citrix Cloud, there are a range of services. So one of those services is our apps and desktop service, and that's the most closely related to the AVD one. So this is a brokering service for apps and desktops delivered from AVD. And that's what you might have known as Zen App or Zen Desktop in the past, but it's our cloud version of that. But as you'll see on that diagram there's a whole range of other services within Citrix Cloud that, again, take our capabilities above and beyond what you can do with AVD. So we've got our gateway service, which I'll come on to shortly. We've got a secure browsing service. We've got our workspace service. We've got access control. We've got endpoint management. We've got analytics. We've got app protection, auto scale. There's a whole load of other things that we bring in at this point to, again, sort of extend and complement what you can do there. And we could talk about those kind of all day, but conceptually at this stage, that's what we do. So we want to click on next, Toby. The next thing we do through our technologies is bring new capabilities in to optimize that environment. So image management, application layering, we've got machine creation services, provisioning services is now available within Azure. So our app layering, and our auto scale, which again takes what you can do with AVD and applies to kind of more intelligence. So we'll talk about hybrid cloud in a moment, but our auto scale is very intelligent software to really optimize the consumption of workloads. And we can do some clever stuff now around making sure that you leverage your on-prem infrastructure if you've got it first, because that's the least cost for certain workloads, and then burst the cloud when you need to. Or we've got some new capabilities around being more intelligent around session timeouts and draining and getting rid of users so we can power machines off. So again, it's all about optimizing the consumption of those workloads, but you're still leveraging the power of AVD, and we're still kind of taking advantage of that. Next one. This is probably the biggest one for most of my customers. I operate in the sort of financial services insurance vertical at Citrix, but this is all about that idea that we take that control plane and we extend what it can do into on-prem. So your existing data centers or your existing IaaS environments, and managing that from that single control plane with all the benefits we've just talked about, but bringing new capabilities in. So things like remote PC. So taking a physical PC that's under someone's desk, bringing that into the fold. So suddenly that guy that was, or girl that was tied to a desk to do their work, suddenly now gets all the same freedoms and flexibilities and options that everyone else got. Even though they've got this big, powerful graphical workstation or data modeling machine under their desk with hardware dongles in the back or whatever, they can now get remote access to that. And that's been massive over COVID. Even though we've been doing it for kind of 20 years, it's been kind of sat in the wings somewhere. It's been absolutely huge. And now, a year and a half ago, it was huge. We got customers that went from 200 remote PCs to 16,000 within less than a week. Now it's coming into the conversations around return to office. So those same people that want to come back into the office, they don't necessarily want to get to sit back at the same desk, but they want that PC still. So now we can leave it where it is and they can sit somewhere else, or we can move that PC into a data center, into a rack somewhere, and give them that same hot desking and kind of 2-meter social distancing or whatever it is they need. So we're basically extending what you can do in AVD, apart from Windows 10 multi-session, which of course is AVD only, but all the other bells and whistles that we've talked about can be extended out into your on-prem infrastructure, and you can run that on whatever tin, whatever hypervisor, whatever bits of kit you've got. And that can be really key both strategically, so customers that want to keep stuff on-prem for all sorts of really good reasons, or they want to, they know that they might make a big investment in AVD, but they're not going to move their entire organization up there on Monday. So having 3 months, 6 months, 3 years migration strategies and leveraging your hybrid rights that you get with Citrix Cloud to keep workloads on-prem and move them as and when appropriate to the workload. So next up is HDX, and as Toby says, RDP has evolved hugely over the years. Great protocol now, but HDX still brings enhancements both to performance. So we've got things like the EDT, so really good handling of unpredictable or changing network conditions. We've got broader peripheral support, broader device support. So Teams optimization, we take what Microsoft have done with optimizing Teams for VDI on Windows devices, and we can do that on Mac, Chrome, and Linux devices, for example. We've got our secure browser service. We've got more insights into the protocol, session shadowing, session recording, watermarking. We've got our Workspace app and all the user experience advantages that go with that. The browser content redirection stuff, the rich media stuff that Toby talks about that RDP can do now. Again, RDP does it, I believe Toby is it Tech Preview, I don't know if it's GA yet, but that's around Windows endpoints, whereas again, we can do it across all of our different endpoints. So all about making sure that the end user is getting the best possible sort of performance and experience and security there. Next up, multi-cloud. I mean, that's just a natural extension to hybrid cloud, the ability to take everything we've just talked about, but run it elsewhere if you need to. And that might be because you want to avoid concentration risk of having all your workloads in AVD, or it might be that you've got certain workloads that have to run in AWS because you're developing code over there, or there's M&A activity where an organization that you've acquired already has workloads in Oracle or Google or AWS or Alibaba or wherever else. So again, just extending out what you can do to wherever best fits your organization. But of course, we want to make sure everything's in AVD, don't we, Ted? Out-of-the-box support for alternate ID providers and flexible authentication models. So we've now got technology around what we're calling adaptive auth. So users get a different authentication process depending on their scenario. So it might be that while I'm in the office, username, password. When I'm at home, username, password, and one-time token. If I'm out of the country, I might need another factor, for example. So we can do these kind of adaptive authentication models to really lock down the environment. And then finally is SaaS and web applications, bringing those into play. Now, I've been around Citrix for 22 or 3 years now, and I go to speak to my customers, and they say, "Oh, yeah, what's the relevance of Citrix now? Everything's SaaS. We're going SaaS with everything now. What's the relevance of Citrix?" And there's loads to talk about there. We've got lots of ways now that we can securely deliver SaaS and web applications, either alongside or instead of traditional, Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So we can deliver SaaS and web apps to the endpoint through, we've got our secure workspace access product, we've got our SIA product, we've got the secure browser service, we've got the secure browser. So it's all about giving a native experience that's secure, optimized, with easy onboarding, single sign-on, all this technologies that we can combine to make sure that those organizations that are bringing SaaS into play are delivered securely and efficiently. And then what we've got, I'll talk about it a little bit later in sort of the later session, talk about our intelligent workspace and the ways that we can provide protections and sort of micro apps and really optimize the kind of user interactions with these kind of big enterprise applications like Salesforce or SAP or Workday. How's that for timing? We bang on?
Not sure about bang on, but but yeah, just to say, I've had a customer conversation the other day, and they asked, could we do XYZ with conditional access? And I said, no, not as it stands, not with the native AVD, but it can be done via Citrix, And again, in a similar conversation, that customer, he was talking about how moved everything to the cloud, and then the business shouted at him and say, well, that's massively expensive. So, you've got all this tin still sitting on premises as well. And that was just another validation of Citrix's capability to continue to deliver a hybrid, we're not talking about hybrid workforce, we're talking about hybrid cloud now, hybrid capabilities from on premises, but also alongside AVD instances. So chunky workloads that are maybe not cloud ready at the moment, keep them on prem, like to workloads or workloads you're happy to put in the cloud, put them there. But Citrix gives you that flexibility to choose, and that is not capability that Microsoft offer at the moment, that hybrid capability. So, and
to be clear, we all of my customers, I encourage them to look at AVD, because I think if you're going to put any Windows-based workload into cloud, AVD is almost certainly the best target platform for you.
Certainly.
Well, yeah. There might be other considerations,
Yeah.
But yeah, almost certainly. I'm not going to say absolutely, definitely, but
always horses for courses. So I think we're handing back to Chris, and they're going to talk about use cases and business cases and all other types of cases.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder that questions are open. Please feel free to drop them in the chat. I think me and Chris, we've run a number of these sessions recently. We're also happy for you to come off mute if you've got any questions for us. But whilst all the stuff that Toby and Danny have just spoken about there is fresh on your mind, if you drop them in the chat, any specific questions for them will be answered in the Q&A at the end. But yeah, whilst they're fresh there, before we talk about a couple of other things, then yeah, please feel free to drop them in. I think there is a poll being pushed out to everybody now. So let us know if you can see that. Hopefully you can see the poll. It's around what you're currently using for VDI, etc., and what sort of is the strongest solution for VDI in your organization at the moment. Whilst you do that, I'll just introduce the session that me and Chris are about to run now. Obviously, Chris, I introduced you earlier on, Cloud Solutions Architect at Bytes. What does that really mean? What kind of stuff do you get up to? What kind of organizations do you work with, and specifically, why is that relevant to what we're talking about today?
Thank you, Chris. So good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well and enjoying the session so far. So my role at Bytes is to help customers understand what the options are in front of them for doing things in cloud, whether the cloud is the right option, and if you do want to go cloud, what is the right combination of things to bring together to deliver on your long-term and sometimes just short-term strategy. So yeah, basically an architect is there to help you pull all those different services into one cohesive solution for your organization. And I work across all types of organizations, so public sector, non-profit, and for-profit organizations, small little 10-man business or 10-person business, all the way up to international global organizations with many millions of employees potentially. So in terms of AVD, we've been rolling out some AVD solutions to our customer base, again, at different scales. So helping organizations understand how AVD comes together, whether it's the right solution for their particular needs, and then architecting that solution to meet those requirements that they have as an individual organization.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I think what's quite important and probably specific to your role is a lot of times people get bombarded with the technology, don't they? They get, this is what the tech can do. This is what is the art of the possible using this technology. Here's a load of cool bells and whistles that can go and be implemented in your organization. But I know from projects that we've worked on, a lot of the time it's actually contextualizing that around what it means for an organization and what an organization actually requires from it. So I suppose if we just do a sort of digest of some of the stuff that we've talked about so far, obviously Danny and Toby have given us a really good overview of what things mean, and maybe we could just do a Q&A with me and you around some of the things that stood out for me that might be relevant to some of the organizations who are on the call today. And yeah, guys, again, if you want to drop some questions in or come off mute to ask some questions to us, that would be great. So I mean, look, we're looking really from a business level about what you need to understand about AVD before rolling it out, right? And I think one of the considerations is actually gathering the business requirements, right? And a lot of times people think it's really easy to find out what the organization requires, but actually sometimes it feels like you're drilling down for stuff. So let's have a look at what kind of conversations people need to ask themselves whilst looking at the components of AVD to make sure that when they're designing a solution, they've got all of these involved. So what are you really talking about? I've put some ideas up here, but.
Yeah, indeed. So I mean, these are really key pieces of information in order to be able to guide an organisation down the right path. So understanding, and to be clear, one really key one is cost, right? You have to balance all of this technology capability and business enablement capability to the cost of that solution. And no organization has got a bottomless pit of money to spend. It all has to be balanced, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to concentrate on AVD in this session, is because AVD can be all things to all organizations. Depends on how much you have to spend, and that spend isn't just on the technology, it can also be on the internal resources or external partnered organization to deliver that solution. So in a nutshell, Windows 365 is really simple to roll out, assuming you've got the licensing in place, because it's just click and done, and then you can just manage it through Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and users can just have a nice little individual space to work in. Very easy, low maintenance, so low cost to the organization in terms of resourcing and administration, and good value for the user license. AVD is kind of all things to all people, so it can be quite low cost, so it can be lower cost than Windows 365 per user. In certain circumstances, it can be a hell of a lot more expensive per user if you go to the ends of the earth to roll out a global infrastructure with all sorts of backup and integration capabilities rolled in. And then obviously you've got Citrix on top, which gives even greater capability than AVD can deliver natively, but again, obviously has an incremental cost on top that can reduce your ongoing administration costs as well. So there's lots of things to balance. So when I'm talking about AVD, if AVD is probably the right solution for a customer, obviously we go into a lot more detail around what is the thinking about how virtual desktops in the cloud is going to be rolled out to their organization. So first one is, what is the user population? Are they distributed globally? Are they potentially roaming around globally? How do you give a low latency environment for each of those use cases? How do you provision something that's the right compute capacity. So one of the great things that AVD has over Windows 365 is you can actually utilize GPU enabled virtual machines. So if you have users that are doing some sort of design capability, or you require really low latency video connectivity, then having GPU enablement, GPU acceleration in the virtual machine can significantly help those, obviously 3D design kind of things, but also anything involving around enhanced video requirements on the video encoding requirements for RDP. And then to the points on the slide, sorry.
That's all right.
So scalability, making sure that you've got enough capacity at the right times for your user population. So understanding, well, are your users only logging in business hours, in which case obviously you can scale up your compute capacity during those peak times and then turn much of that capacity off out of peak times, which can obviously drive significant cost reductions. Making sure you've got those compute resources available wherever the user needs them, and in the case of some sort of failure, that you have some resilient capability in various ways, making sure that you can cope with significant disaster, whether that's within your organization network or potentially in an Azure region. How do you cope with different scenarios and design for that at the architectural level? And then one of the key things that is often missed around any technology implementation is how do you actually get your users excited about this new capability and actually start using it in earnest? How do you make sure that it's fit for need and that it's not going to be a suboptimal experience? It's actually going to be beneficial to that user populace.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Chris. And I think that's obviously something that when you think about whether WVD or AVD, is there for the enterprise and where it really plays in the enterprise space, I think one of the common things that we talk about is the skill sets that people have to be able to administer Azure, right? Fundamentally, when you're operating as your virtual desktop, you're operating quite a few things still. We go to this slide and we see that actually Microsoft still manage quite a lot of things, but fundamentally underneath it, you still need to have some Azure skills in-house and a way of operating that platform at scale to be able to deploy certain things within Azure and to be able to manage and operate it. And obviously Toby spoke about some of the great ways of automating some of that and spoke about being able to use the portal for that. But I remember looking at Danny's slide not too long ago where he showed all the things that are capable within Citrix. And from what I've seen, and I'm not sure if you agree with this or not, but from what I've seen, it looks a lot easier to use and interact with, especially when it comes to scale, right?
Exactly that, yeah. AVD sits really well in the middle because, as I say, you can kind of fit it to whatever your needs are. But the cost of that is increased requirements in terms of experience, knowledge, and ongoing maintenance. Citrix gives you a hell of a lot more capability out of the box that you can just click, and it's delivered for you basically in a nice best practices way that's nicely controlled, and W365 is kind of desktop in a box. AVD, you have to think about a lot of it yourself. Obviously, it gives you lots of capability to do whatever it is you need for your particular organization, but you need to be able to spend the time and have the knowledge and skill set to be able to deliver that. And yeah, the key thing is it's Azure, right? It's Azure Virtual Desktop, so you need to know Azure platform very well. So you need to have good networking connectivity. You need to have good understanding of how that fits in with your on-premise environment, if you still have one, and how that ties in with anything you have deployed in terms of application infrastructure, making sure that you have good controls around updates and imaging, and Toby and yourself just made a really good point. Making sure that if you have good skills around managing an Azure environment and you've gone down the infrastructure as code route, then AVD is a great solution because you can control that environment using code. And that's pretty unique for AVD, and that allows you to reduce your ongoing maintenance costs with obviously that upfront investment of writing some code to do so. The other element that was mentioned by Toby is around imaging, and again, AVD can be all things to all organizations. You can just utilize your existing desktop update infrastructure, so maybe SCCVM or Microsoft Endpoint Manager if you've gone that far, and use that to just do updates in place and keep those virtual desktop environments alive and just update as you go. Or the more cloud type approach that I tend to recommend, but again requires a lot of upfront effort and a little bit of ongoing effort, is around using imaging. So Toby mentioned Azure Image Builder. That's a great technology for building out your images for not just virtual desktops in Azure, but other requirements as well in Azure. And that allows you to have that more cattle approach to your environment. So you basically say, okay, right, well, I'm going to create this golden image, make sure it's all good, it's got all the latest updates, got all my applications configured as I need them, it's all the latest updates of those applications. I can then image that and then roll that out into my AVD environment, and destroying what I already had deployed. And you can do that incrementally. You don't have to do it in a maintenance window. You can just do that while your user's still logged in to the environment. So again, lots of capability in there. You just have to spend the time to be able to understand the possibilities and obviously press some buttons to make that happen.
Perfect, thanks, Chris. So let's flip that conversation on its head then. In a world where you do have to have some operational overhead of managing these elements still in Azure, as opposed to taking that away using W365 or something like that, what are the benefits? Why would I still want to do that? I'm an organization, I'm saying, do I go W365 or do I go AVD? And someone says, okay, well, W365, you don't have to manage all of these things. Why would I still want to manage those?
Great question. So yeah, basically the main thing is being able to make your own decisions around availability, for example, and having the ability to say, okay, right, well, I want to have multi-session desktops because my users are not particularly demanding in terms of compute power, so I can bundle a bunch of those onto a single VM rather than having to spend 20, 30 pounds per month per user for a personal desktop. Again, assuming your users can be bundled together onto a multi-session environment. Being able to scale that environment up and down on demand. Again, you can do that in Citrix in an automated fashion, but with AVD, you have to think about that up front. But again, you can write that script to control the scale to your exact needs. I've spoken to one organization that didn't have a traditional scenario where they just wanted to scale up or down based on the number of users logged into the environment, or maybe just on a time basis. They wanted to make sure that there's specific virtual machines available for a specific user populace for just a couple of days every month for a regular monthly process. However, they don't know how long that process will run. It might be a day, it might be 5 days, and also the user populace using those systems is variant in size. So they needed to combine a little bit standard scale up, scale down on a time schedule, and also deal with variance in scale requirement during that window. The other things, if you're running in a hybrid environment where you have applications on premise and in Azure, maybe other clouds, you can create a network topology in Azure to support whatever you can dream up, pretty much. Yes, Windows 365 Enterprise can support connecting those desktops into a network and therefore onwards into other systems and networks. However, with AVD, it'd be natively Azure, natively AD joined, and can integrate really closely. Again, you're in control. You can run GPOs and all sorts of stuff to make sure that you have those user-facing systems completely integrated into the AVD experience, basically, as you would today.
Thanks, Chris.
And the other major thing is the bottom bar on the right-hand side on this slide is FS logics. You know, if you do need to have user profiles, you know, not use OneDrive, for example, for that profile storage, then you know, again, it may be not FS logic. You might be using some other user profile mechanism. Again, AVD gives you a good capability in that regard, as does Citrix.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I suppose, you know, you've mentioned some of these already. And this is, you know, latency versus download speed. If you're experiencing low latency, or sorry, if you're worried about latency getting to some of your files that you've got stored in the cloud, obviously, if you've got your desktop in the cloud, that's a trade-off that you're going to have to make. Let's say you're accessing large files and things like that. You're accessing CAD drawings, for example. Downloading those over an internet pipe might be challenging and take quite a while. And so an organization would say, actually, maybe we could take the couple of milliseconds worth of latency that it takes for people to use them very quickly in order to offset that. And then, yeah, some of the security posture improvements that Toby mentioned this morning. Obviously, Microsoft have invested so much in their platform and being able to do it. You would just never be able to build a VDI environment with that kind of security overhead investment yourselves. I've got to move on. We've got to move over to Danny now, who's going to present a little bit more about Citrix and where Citrix comes into it. Danny, I'll hand over to you. I'm assuming you've got some slides ready there.
I do. I've got a few things. There's a couple of bits that have cropped up just in the last little session, so I'm going to kind of change my flow just very slightly. One thing is on the cost. So there was a bit of chat there around how, you know, it reflected some of the perception we see in the market that Citrix adds cost to an AVD platform. And I just want to address that. I know a bunch of attendees today, I think we're on a previous session where I talked about this in depth, but I just, in case anybody wasn't on that session, I'll just by way of a reminder. What we believe Citrix is that we can very positively impact the cost of running workloads in AVD. And from two angles. One is from the consumption perspective. So we can combine technologies from Citrix like WEM, MCSIO, HDX, browser content redirection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we can reduce the cost of running any given workload in AVD. And I can show you this very quickly. And then on the operational side, you know, we touched a lot on how the Citrix Cloud Control Plane with our tools, our insights, our analytics, our interfaces make it much easier, much quicker to deploy, support, manage, patch, update, and particularly around troubleshooting user issues. So with AVD alone, you need to sort of switch on some additional services, Azure Monitor Service, log analytics, etc., to get a level of insights. Where with Citrix, you get way more than that included in the platform. So I'm just going to very, very quickly, if I may, just show you an example scenario of a fictional customer workload, just to illustrate the sorts of areas where we can impact the cost. So this, assuming you can see it, is a tool that we built. It's an estimating tool. So this isn't a quoting tool, but this is designed to help illustrate what a given workload might cost the customer to run in AVD. So super quickly, what we were able to do is define up to 4 sort of personas or use cases. So here I've got a typical example, certainly from myself in our financial services and insurance. We have a large proportion of call center users or contact center users. We might have some developers, and these guys are the typical guys that want Windows 10 single user. They want to be able to install software. They want admin rights. They want to be able to reboot on demand. We might have some third-party users that come in, and they might do some software development, or they might be doing kind of support or whatever, and then some back office guys. So in this hypothetical scenario, let's put it into pounds because I think we're all UK based, aren't we? Oops. So in this scenario, about 3,000 users, and just off the bat, we can play with this all day long, but we might be looking at around £1.3 million to run as a consumption cost over a 3-year term for that workload. We have some operational costs, which I'll come back to. There's some RDS license costs here because we've got some server users. So native AVD might be a 2.1 million investment over 3 years. Given CVAD's advanced edition, user and device cows at 3,000 users over 3 years, you'd be looking at sort of just under £600,000. So, as a customer, you might be thinking, well, that's a $2.7 million investment. That's £600,000 I'm going to spend there as an add-on to what I'm going to spend with Microsoft. But actually, we believe you could save somewhere in the region of £860,000. So that is a combination of consumption savings around 566, operational costs, some auto scale, etc. And what that means is the joint proposition in this scenario would be looking at about 1.9 million, which is actually 260,000 cheaper than doing AVD alone. So, I mean, I can talk about, this has been my kind of passion project for the last kind of 18 months. I can talk about this all day long, about how we achieve these numbers, where these savings come from. But I'm happy to do that. If anybody has a particular use case, give us a shout. But what we can show is, even though there's a reasonably sizable investment here in Citrix technology, actually, once we take the savings into account, that can actually save you money per user per month. The cost, you're saving them the cost of a cup of coffee per user per month, over and above doing AVD alone. Or another way of looking at it is that saving versus a native AVD cost could finance or could pay for an expansion opportunity. So we could potentially support an additional 400 users for the same money. So like I said, I don't want to take the whole session. That wasn't the objective of today, but just to remind everybody that there are considerable commercial kind of considerations here. Now, we don't always make it cheaper. I'm absolutely clear about that. We will always make savings. So our technology will reduce your consumption costs. Whether or not that will pay for your Citrix licensing will depend on your workloads, and we can go through the different models for that. But just wanted to make that point. So I think that's okay. And then,
so one important thing here is there's a cost saving here, but also an improved user experience, right?
Well, that's the next point. Is so in fact, actually, if I bring the deck up, there's kind of, as I see it, there's four kind of value pillars, if you like, to what we do over and above AVD native. So let me slide share that. So let me bring that over here so I'm not staring off into the distance. So to my mind, there's four kind of value pillars, whatever you want to call them. So functionality. So Toby and I covered that sort of briefly in that earlier session. So this is the things that you can do at a technical level above and beyond AVD native. So things like remote PC, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, the workspace, Teams optimization on non-Windows devices, seamless delivery of SaaS and web applications, all that kind of stuff. So there's a bunch of technical things that you can do to enhance your technical delivery and meet more business use cases, and satisfy more users. Next one is cost optimization. Touched on that again very briefly. So that, again, two areas there. One is the consumption. So consume less resources in cloud, and that's through things like greater user density, cheaper storage options, less network egress charges, all that good stuff. But then also on the operational side, so not having to pay for the Azure monitoring services and log analytics, being able to resolve help desk tickets much quicker, so better insights, better reports. Our performance analytics gives real proactive insights into what's happening. We can avoid these, what do you call them, sort of black hole servers that are perhaps not running correctly, but they're still accepting incoming connections and users are getting no response. Identifying performance bottlenecks, categorizing user experience, giving them user experience scores, all that kind of stuff. So there's a bunch of stuff we can do to really optimize the cost of both delivering and managing the platform. Then we've got sort of security. So it's a whole, again, I mean, AVD, Microsoft have done a cracking job, very, very secure. But what we can do is we can extend that again. So there's kind of four areas. We can extend the security of the endpoint. We've got a comprehensive endpoint management solution, which will take what you can do with Intune and again, add more policies and more controls and more flexibility. We can control, or we can secure user behavior. So our security analytics platform can categorize user behaviors and give every user a user experience score, a security score, and then adapt that score based on their behavior. So everyone on this call would have a different baseline score depending on where we log in from, what kind of devices, what networks, what applications we consume, what desktops we consume, what files we consume, and then that score will change because if it recognizes that I log in from 8 till 6, whatever it is, from Brighton, not Monday to Friday, but if suddenly I log in from Beijing Tuesday afternoon, something's not right, and we can take adaptive behaviors. We can so it's user behavior, endpoint. From a browsing perspective, we've got 3 or 4 different technologies, and it can be confusing sometimes to understand which one to use. But we have an embedded hardened browser within our Workspace app, and we can apply policies to that with things like watermarking, navigation controls, copy paste print controls. We can protect the unsanctioned apps. So our SIA product can be used to enable users to securely and safely access external SaaS and web applications that we haven't delivered them. So if you want to give them access to Gmail or Facebook or whatever, we can still, and LinkedIn, we can apply a range of protections to that. We have our secure browser service, so we can take either known bad or untrusted web content, and we as Citrix will run that code in an isolated browser running in Azure on the Chromium browser in Linux. We can execute that code and present it back to the user like a seamless published application. They're almost none the wiser. They get slightly different little sort of icons at the top, but that's completely isolated from their endpoint. So from a malware protection perspective, very, very secure, completely isolated. It's just screen scraping, presentation technology. So we can do all that. We can protect the native delivery of the desktops and the applications. So the classic Citrix policies with watermarking, device peripheral policies, our conditional access stuff. So just a bunch of stuff that we layer above and beyond the security posture of AVD natively. But then a lot of this does come down to user experience, and that covers a whole gamut of considerations. So what kind of devices can the user use? With our workspace, the user, and I will go on about this a little bit more in a second, but the user experience is consistent and contextualized. So whether I'm on a tablet, an iPhone, a MacBook, Windows client, an iGel client, it will look and feel familiar, but it also is contextualized. So I might get a different experience with different logon credential requirements, different multi-factor, different applications might be delivered to me, or I might get the same applications, but they're delivered in a different way. So absolutely about user experience. And even with the enhancements that RDP we've already sort of touched on, I think we can, well, I would like to think Toby would agree, even with the browser content redirection stuff, the user experience, just the pure consumption experience, the screen, the scrolling, the key lagging, all that kind of stuff. We have 30 years of experience of really optimizing that. So they're the 4 value areas. If you take nothing away from this session, from my session today, just try to remember, there's 4 areas where we take what AVD does and we just kind of, take it up a notch. We're not taking anything away from it. We're just kind of building on it and extending it. So where's my mouse gone? So, another thing, I was going to just jump, based on the poll results, I just want to show something very quickly, because I noticed that the vast majority of the respondents, I don't see how many respondents, but there's a lot of people currently running on-prem Citrix. So what I'm going to do, just to save me running out of time, and just in case I run out of time, I just want to touch on, this is Citrix Cloud specifically, but you'll see how that relates to AVD. So just for those of you that are running Citrix on-prem at the moment, and you're considering Citrix Cloud, very quickly, this is kind of what it looks like for you kind of technically. So your on-prem environment looks a little bit like this. I mean, depending on the size and scale of your environment, you might have many of each of these components. So a classic, on-prem, or even what we call sort of perpetual deployment in cloud looks a little bit like this. So you've got your workloads down here. So Windows servers, VDI, term that I hate, but your desktops are running down there. You've got delivery controllers, you've got a SQL database, you've got storefront, licenses, Director, Studio. You've probably got at least 2 of each of these, maybe more if you've got multiple delivery resource locations. What Citrix Cloud does is it basically dissolves a lot of those roles down into a service that we provide. And what that means is we take away the pain, the risk, the cost, the headache of deploying, managing, scaling, patching, securing, all of those components, and we turn that into a sort of SaaS consumption service. And you replace your on-prem components with a couple of cloud connectors. So that's our virtual apps and desktop service. Our gateway service is available. So gateway service is a cut-down version of NetScaler or ADC, as it's officially called. HGX proxy. We've got some new services coming around the gateway service soon, like I say, around adaptive authentication, etc. But that's kind of step 1, moving to cloud. And even if you keep all your workloads where they are, which we're hoping you're going to move some of them into AVD or all of them, if a standard Citrix environment could look like this. So you leverage Citrix Cloud for your orchestration, administration, management, brokering, all that kind of good stuff. But once you've done that, then you've got choice. Then you can really start thinking about, where am I going to put my workloads? Where do they best fit? Is AVD, is Azure IaaS, AWS, Where can I put my workloads? And you have that choice, and you can put them into AVD, and if you want to put everything there, great. But as I said earlier, you might be there'll be a transition phase. And don't forget, once you're running that, it's all very well putting your desktops in Azure under AVD, but think about the applications that the user going to consume once they're up there. Where are the back-end resources? Where are the databases, the licenses, the data stores, the profiles, all this kind of stuff. So think about how we can use our hybrid model to make that process as seamless as possible. And what you can also do through our kind of aggregation is you can potentially avoid doing an upgrade. So you can do a migration away from your traditional Citrix environments, and you can migrate away rather than upgrading. So rather than having to touch these kind of 6.5 or 7x environments, you could leave these components alone, provision a new AVD-based Citrix Cloud managed farm, and move your workloads in. The end user is none the wiser. They connect to their workspace. They're getting resources published from any one of these, and as you're moving them around, users don't care, but you're not having to kind of touch or upgrade or change any of these. So I hope that all makes sense. Let me just run back to the start of the deck because there's probably a few more bits to talk about that I haven't mentioned. Hybrid cloud we have talked about at length now. So really, as a strategic or a tactical solution, really important, and it does give you more capabilities around, as I say, things like remote PC, and it does give you the opportunity to leverage the infrastructure you've already made or the investments you've already made in your existing tin. Optimizing operations, again, touched on this a little bit. Better dashboards, better reports. I mean, our Citrix Cloud environment, because it is a kind of walled garden, our developers know it inside and out. They don't have to now think about all the different networks, storage, hypervisors, all these other databases that customers have had over the last 20, 30 years. So it's much easier for us to develop new capabilities, new services, when we've got new dashboards, new reports, new insights, new services, new analytics coming almost daily, because it is much easier for us to develop that and for you to get advantage of them, take advantage of them much quicker than ever before. But as I say, resolving help desk tickets quicker. We've got some new integrations we've just announced, I think today or yesterday, with ServiceNow. So automating some of the ticket resolutions, resolving issues with VDAs without any human interaction at all. So there's some really clever stuff around optimizing the operation of the platform, not just the consumption. Performance, again, we've got our things like our WEM technology. We've got things like our performance analytics. We've got auto scale, which, as I say, is all about optimizing the consumption, but also doing some clever stuff now around leveraging and optimizing your on-prem infrastructure, and then only bursting into cloud when you need to, either based on peak demand or DR or whatever. And once you're in Citrix Cloud and you've got an AVD as a platform, then you really can start thinking about kind of BCP and BAU as being one and the same. You just move your workloads around. If we have another big incident, or even small incidents where suddenly there's more demand for virtualized infrastructure, you can consume it safely and securely. This is all about the consumption stuff we've talked about. I mean, we can increase user density by anywhere between sort of 10 and 30% in a typical scenario. I mean, we've seen higher than that, but that will depend on your workloads and your applications. Provisioning, we've talked about a little bit about MCS. We've also, as I say, now got PVS coming into cloud, which is great technology for very rapid deployment of new images, but also instantaneous rollback in the event that you want to switch those machines to performing a different role, or there's an issue with your build. It's sort of instantaneous kind of rollback. We've got time saved around support issues, session recording, ServiceNow integration I've touched on. Security I've kind of talked about at length, but there's loads of stuff built into this. Even if you just use the core apps and desktop service, the ability to apply more policies, more controls, more insights into user behavior stuff is key. I think classic stuff like watermarking. So you can combine it with our app protection, so we can prevent screen scraping and key logging. But even if you don't consume that additional service, we can still have a watermark on the screen. So when someone does you can't stop someone taking a photo of a screen, but you can make sure that there's a username, IP address, etc., to assist in the audit trail of where that data leak came from. We're doing for time, maybe that's 10 minutes. HJX, touched a lot about that. Very much designed to really optimize the user experience and reduce the data egress charges. In our testing, we've seen reduction in chargeable network traffic coming out of AVD by around 33%. Now that will depend on how many monitors you've got, how high your resolution is, how graphically intensive your applications are. But we can reduce the cost of that consumption of the network component. Teams optimization we've touched on. We're taking what Microsoft have done. As usual, we're taking what they've done and we are building on it. So as I say, we optimize for non-Windows devices is probably the biggest differentiator at the moment. But we are literally lockstep with those guys. Our developers and their developers are kind of literally, almost literally sitting next to each other on this stuff. Login times optimized through WEM, etc., and making sure that we multi-thread all the different processes that are happening at logon time. Touched on this already. So Workspace App, again, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but this is the evolution of what we Receiver as was. So really, again, very much designed around user experience, user productivity, user engagement, making it as easy as possible for users to get access to the resources they need with intelligent automation. We've got this kind of unified experience, as I say, it will look and feel familiar regardless of the device and form factor that you're logging in from. We've got the kind of classic. This is the existing workspace. So this is bringing all your applications, and that's not just your published apps, but this is web and SaaS, as I say, and delivering them in a number of ways, either through the embedded browser or secure browser, and applying various different policies to them. But single sign-on. Toby mentioned we won't go into depth, but making sure that we use our FAS if you need to make sure that it is a single sign-on even onto your published applications and desktops. Desktop delivery, on-prem desktops, physical desktops, cloud-hosted desktops, Linux or Windows, all accounted for, and bringing files front and center. So this is the workspace as it is now. So again, if someone wants to work on a project file, they don't want to necessarily have to go and find their desktop, launch the desktop, go and find Microsoft project, launch project, do a file browse to go and find the file they've been working on, try and bring kind of recent and favorite documents front and center. So getting them working as quickly as possible. The new intelligent workspace takes that the next step up. So we've still kind of organized and aggregated their resources, but now what we've done is applied intelligence based on what we know around user behavior and peer behavior, and surfacing insights and activity, a bit like a kind of social media on your phone, I suppose, is bringing those things to your attention that are important. And there's a couple of examples here, and we probably don't have time for much of a demo, but notifications from all your different kind of what we call systems of records, whether it's Concur, Workday, Salesforce, crikey, I can't remember all the different ones we use now. There's quite a few. And surfacing them, and you have the ability to filter them, order them, silence them, and this is stuff that that tells you information, but you can act on it. So you can. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. The feed is all those notifications. That's telling you stuff. If you want to do stuff, you've got these common actions. So if I want to submit an expense report, or the classic example, I don't think anyone at Citrix has done this slide without talking about holiday requests. If you want to request a holiday, you don't have to remember to go to Workday or find out, remember the process for doing that. You can click on a request PTO button and get straight into the action. We've still got our recent apps, files, and desktops. But the point about these activity feeds in the middle is that you can take that information and just go, great, yep, dismiss, close, whatever. Or if you want more information, you can click on that card, look into a little bit more detail and think, okay, great, that's all I need. Or if that's still not enough, click another button and actually go into the application itself and get the full fat version of the application. It's a consistent experience. So I'll give a few more minutes for Q&A in a second, so I'll just whiz through these last few bits. Okay, demo, don't have time for that. Hybrid cloud we've touched on. Access control, again, is all about making sure secure ways, lots of different ways that we can ensure that the delivery of sanctioned and unsanctioned applications. So those applications that you want to deliver for those users, or the stuff that the shadow IT or those web and SaaS apps the customers users are using without your knowledge are protected, filtered, watermarked, etc. I won't go through all these. Analytics, again, very, very quickly. We've got 3 pillars of analytics. We've got security, performance, and operations. that use our kind of AI machine learning kind of infrastructure that we built in the cloud across pretty much all of our portfolio, our networking, our apps and desktops, our endpoint management, our content collaboration. And really it's all about securing it, ensuring that it performs well, and giving you the insights and data you need to act accordingly and provision more or changes behavior or whatever. So again, given in the interest of time, I won't go into too much detail on this, but just so you're aware that those three pillars exist. From an admin experience, again, no real time for a demo, but when I think those of you that have been working with Citrix for some time, I've probably seen various consoles of various quality kind of come and go over the years, and been frustrated at various points, I'm sure. But again, one of the things about the unified admin experience of Citrix Cloud is, you go to customername.cloud.com, you get access to the different services and capabilities that you're entitled to under your subscription, and very easy to consume, very easy to monitor, very easy to administer. And as I say, these are evolving almost daily. So new insights, new dashboards, new reports, new analytics all the time. So that's me for now. I think we've got sort of 10 or so minutes for Q&A. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks for that, Danny. That was really good. We do indeed have a little bit of time. I'm actually going to very briefly hand over to Pete. Pete Ely, who wasn't at the start, but Pete heads up our EUC and Modern Workplace team here at Bytes. Pete, you're going to talk a little bit about some of the things and some of the areas where we can help. Obviously, me and Chris spoke about how we're engaging with organizations, but obviously you see it from a much wider end user experience kind of lens. So why don't you, over to you really, and you can just talk about some of the engagements that we do with customers and some of the ways that we can help.
Sure, thank you. And it's been a good presentation so far. Glad to see we are using a lot of buzzwords. So if you've got your buzzword bingo sheet out there, analytics, machine learning, AI, it's all been mentioned today. Great work, guys. In terms of the one-to-one engagements, I mean, as you can see on screen, we've got a number of ways in which we can help. And it's interesting, we had a couple of questions that have come through, and the questions are related to ones who have got Citrix and Microsoft, who we're obviously presenting today about. But there's also elements that are non-Citrix related, non-Microsoft related. So things like via soft phones. What do we do about BYOD? Do we think about sort of thin client technology? And there's lots of other moving parts in an EUC solution that really need to be factored into this. So what the idea of these engagements are is that you can really expand upon the whole solution end to end. And we're very cognizant of the fact that, it's not just a single solution. So we could sort of say, for instance, yes, AVD is a good solution for you and go down that route. But how is it going to be delivered? What's the mechanism you are going to do to manage it? Is it something that you're going to manage internally using infrastructure as a code, as another buzzword, as Chris suggested, or are you going to use something else to do that? Are you going to consider managed services? Perhaps that's always an option, and this is really where we can open up these options to you. So we offer things like the Modern Workspace Advisory Service, where we would look into what investments you've already made, how you operate as a business, what your strategies are, and what would be a really good fit in terms of making a project really work. So you might already have an investment in Citrix, you might have a plan to move to Azure and certain workloads. It's all up in the air at the moment as to what you might want to do. Do you want to stay with VDI? Do you want to move away from VDI? Well, we can kind of work out what would be a really good fit for you, give you that advice and report back. And it's completely independent advice that we give. So, the idea here is that, you can take it or leave it as the advice goes, but at least you've really engaged on a level with people who have experience in the market, are seeing what is working for other customers, and we're able to really sort of work out, both from an operational and a commercial point of view, whether that's something that would be a good idea doing. Of course, there's other things like that could be specific to a project. So a virtual desktop assessment would be ideal if you are looking at kicking off a VDI project, and we'd encourage anyone who is looking at doing that really to make sure you do an assessment first of all to understand what your estate looks like. Perhaps if you are looking to expand your environment, that would still be a good idea, because it really gives you that insight to base what your workloads would look like in a real world environment. So this is the kind of thing that we would encourage in those areas. The endpoint envisioning workshop is for those who are looking to incorporate what they're doing around endpoint manager. And we've spoken a bit about Windows 365, how that incorporates. There's been questions raised about management of endpoints. If you are using an VDI, how challenging is that? What do you need to factor in? Do we go thin client, or do we remain as just an endpoint that is almost like BYOD? You have to kind of ask a lot of questions, and these are important to raise. So a workshop of this type would really hone in specifically on that physical endpoint and how you're going to manage that, and what the challenges are to think about. And then lastly, we've got things like a Citrix Workshop, which we can support as well. And this is almost like a way of, okay, if you see that your investment in Citrix is really good, and you like what you've heard today in terms of how Citrix are working well with Microsoft and vice versa, and it seems like this collaborative partnership is something that you could support as part of your strategy as well, well then look at having a Citrix Workshop with us, because we can start building out how this could work for you, what the moving parts are that would be involved, how Citrix Workspace Cloud is going to incorporate into that, what their roadmap looks like. And I mean, you know, certain things that haven't been even brought to mention today by Danny, things like Citrix are working on with SIA and SD-WAN are very interesting as well. They've got some SASE solutions out there that are very interesting, that are worth looking at as well. We've spoken about Microsoft's point of presence globally. Citrix have got an equally impressive point of presence as well, and that sort of paints a picture of actually, when you are considering the wider picture, how Citrix can be more influential as well. Their workspace portal, we've looked at that today, and that is a very impressive tool in itself. But what Citrix are doing going forward with a recent product they've acquired called Reich, and how that will incorporate into the business portfolio going forward, is very interesting as well. So there's lots of stuff that are making Citrix still very relevant in the user experience space, and this is just one area that would be very interesting for you to consider, to help expand that for your business as well. So just a couple of things that we can offer at Bytes that have worked very well for customers, and as you can see, I'm wearing an Okta t-shirt today. So it's like, you know, it doesn't need to be Microsoft Citrix focused. It can be expanding upon the wider portfolio of different kind of vendors that we work with, and suppliers that we can really help with that conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Pete. And obviously, I think a lot of that is about helping customers break down the whole landscape, because it is so vast. Obviously, you know, we're not just scoped to one technology. We're not just talking about one thing. It's a case of looking at what, you know, going back to one of my original slides, is looking at what the business requirements actually are, and then figuring out, you know, from the vast array of technology, how we can actually present that back into a business case. One of the things that obviously Danny spoke about was that calculator. I know that we've done breakdowns similar ones for customers using those kind of tools, and we've walked them through them engagements to show which ones are going to bring the most value to their business. I think we've got another poll question popping up now to check that you're all still with us, just before we go on to a Q&A. If you wouldn't mind answering that, that would be great. And then hopefully we can get some of your questions answered, seeing as we've got, we should have the right people on the call to get most of these questions answered, guys, if we've got people from Citrix, Microsoft, and Bytes. So yeah, I'll give you a second to answer some of those. I know, yeah, there's been some questions there already. Maybe we can talk about some of those. So moving on to the Q&A, what I'll do is I'll stop presenting for the moment, and you can see all of our faces just a little bit bigger. For some of you, you might appreciate that. Pete Healy, I always make the joke that he's got the best hair in technology, so there we go.
It's unfair on Danny.
Yeah, so yeah, look, obviously any questions that you've got, pop them in the chat there if you're still with us. One of the questions that I've got here that are written down, if you give me 1 second. So there are some people that have asked about making AVD multi-session host deployments visible within Intune, and how does that work? Toby, is that one for you?
Yeah, I think multi-session Windows 10 was recently added to support for Intune. I'm not very good with Intune. I had to play with it the other day and it was disastrous. So, but yeah, I believe support was added not long ago, so you should be able to manage those devices. Windows 10 multi-session devices should be manageable in Intune now. I think it was added maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, it's currently in preview. Yeah.
Is it preview still? Right. Okay. I still play catch up on what's preview, what's private preview, what's public preview, what I can't talk about. So.
Killer, I think Tom announced it on Twitter on when was that? 25th of May.
Is that private preview? So it may still be in that. They sometimes
public preview.
Public preview, yeah. So you'll find that the way that Microsoft do things is they go through, like, we won't announce when it will go, GA. So people always ask when will it GA, and I say, here's how long is a piece of string. Because it's all about quality gates, so feedback from customers, and are you still receiving any and gates of quality that goes through before it gets released. So but if it's in public preview, you should be able to sign up and try it, but please don't use that in production just quite at the moment. Just test it out and provide us feedback with it. So
okay, thanks for that, Toby. Another question has just come through. It sounded like AVD are non-persistent machines. What the logon time's like? Maybe Apex installs at logon. Does FSLogix play any part in the mechanism? Chris Spear, is this within your realm? Do you want to take this one?
I'm very happy to answer that. Obviously, Toby, feel free to jump in if you'd like to mention anything. But yeah, basically, AVD VMs are persistent. They're up for the duration that you specify. If you don't shut them down, so they can be persistent. You can also just have an environment that shuts those VMs off completely and destroys all data on a regular basis if you would like to. There's again, depends on what you're looking to achieve in your environment. Most AVD implementations are persistent and will have longevity in those virtual machines until the next round of updates. Basically, at that point, cull and create new VMs from new image. In some cases, otherwise update in place, depending on your strategy.
I think the question was also about Apex or App Attach. So it isn't an install, Alex, that's asking the question. It's the application is kind of mounted and available into the file system, a bit like the profile, but it's not actually installed. It appears to be installed as such. So it does. I don't have any specifics on it, but we're trying to make it quite scalable and I wouldn't suggest that every application is mapped as an App Attach or Apex package. I would say install as much as you can into the base image. Use things like FSLogix app masking to hide stuff in the base image. But if you've got an HR app and you don't want to create a new a host pool for HR specifically, then if that app is supported with MSIX App Attach, then by all means do it. But I wouldn't use it as a sort of packaging method for every single application you want to deliver. So
perfect. Thanks, Toby.
I was just going to, sorry, add,
I think just as a little bit.
So I was just going to add, there was a specific part of the question around Apex is installed. The Apex app is installed at boot time of the VM, not when user logs in. So yeah, again, it's kind of integrated into the environment early on in the life cycle of the VM.
Perfect.
I was just going to say as well, because quickly in terms of terminology, the bit about AVD are non-persistent machines. Just remember, AVD is the kind of umbrella term. Within AVD, you can do Windows 7, Windows 10, VDI, single user. You can do Windows 10 multi-session, or you can do server OS. So, and within those, you can't do a persistent Windows 10 multi-session because it's not dedicated to the user. You can't sort of, the machine can be up, but it's as soon as it's rebooted, it's not a persistent desktop in the old terminology of VDI. So you can have a persistent Windows 10, which is stored one-to-one mapping like Cloud PC and Windows 365. So it's just more about the terminology that AVD could be a number of different types of virtual machines. I think it's just be clear on that.
I think it's just worth coming back to the question as well, Chris, because the question's really centered around logon times, and I'd be keen to get your opinion, Danny, Toby, Chris, on this, because in my experience, VDI logon times has been a challenge for years, and there's been various solutions that have helped with improving of logon times. So obviously we're at a stage now where it hasn't made a lot of noise, but it could potentially still be a problem. So I think one of the questions really sort of centers around how FSLogix helps with that. And I think certainly FSLogix helps with that profile load, because that has always been seen as a big bottleneck when it comes to a VDI logon. But is this app attach also going to add further bottlenecks to it? Is there anything else that we need to consider with when it comes to logon times?
I don't necessarily believe it's about login times. I think it's about consistency of login times. I mean, I remember the days when two people walk in an office, sit down, one gets in a minute and one gets in 4 hours. It was because things were being dragged down and etc. I think if it's consistent, then there's not a problem. I mean, I use AVD 2 or 3 times a week internally. If I end up downstairs on my MacBook, which isn't corporately enrolled, I use AVD to gain access. But the login's always consistent. But I mean, it must be a minute, maybe, from hitting it and watching the group policy applying stuff. But to me, in my head, that's fine, because for the benefit I'm getting out of it. But what I would say is the other side of it, and I think I spoke about it earlier on, is we have the world is used to, if you've got a laptop, up, usable, down, not. So we've got that, experience aspect where, if you then try and log into corporate resource and you've powered up your device and you're using AVD or BYO or whatever, and you're getting 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, it's not necessarily, if that was the time you expect, then it's not as bad. But you can optimize things within it. I mean, I used to work for AppSense, so we optimized things, and we were always playing, we can do it in 4.5 seconds, but 4.5 seconds against 10 seconds, is it noticeable? I don't know.
Yeah. I think a couple of things. One is, there's a whole range of things you can do around pre-provisioning machines, making machines up and ready. You can use our auto scale to preempt workloads. I would suggest it's quite a read, but if you have a look for James Ranking's ultimate guide to optimizing the logon experience, it's like a 4, 6, 10-part series on all the different factors there. I would have a good old read of that if you really want to get to the bottom of optimizing all the different factors that play into that.
Yeah, Danny, do you want to pop that in the chat, maybe, just the name of that, just so people.
Yeah, I was just googling. I found part 2. I'll find part 1. I'll give you the link.
We've got to move on from the logon question, just purely for time. We are actually over time at the moment, but I suppose just to answer one more question, which I'm taking a risk here because we could also go down the rabbit hole of everyone's technology areas again. Someone has asked in the chat, they've mentioned that one of their main drivers for change is the HD video capability over virtual desktops for Microsoft Teams. So currently they're running latest LTSR turned on for video redirection, but the bandwidth and resources required to redirect the videos results in a poor experience. So what they're essentially doing is connecting 2 teams outside of Citrix and using Teams that way. They're really keen to understand which cloud product gives the best Teams video camera experience. So they're running on-prem, in an on-prem Citrix environment. Teams is not going well, it's running poorly. Is that going to be better for them in the cloud? How can we make sure that obviously that's resolved if they are driving change? Pete, I'm going to ask you first, actually, because you've probably got more experience doing this and delivering this for end users across a range of technologies, right?
So yeah, I mean, the question is not straightforward to answer, because the advice would always be don't run soft phones or this kind of video content through a virtual session, especially if those users are home workers, things like that. There's too many variables to take into account. Their network, the bandwidth, there's all sorts of problems that could be introduced that you just cannot capture. But what we would say is that Citrix have worked extensively to make this as best a solution as you possibly can. And they worked with a number of vendors, not just Microsoft, and their protocol supports the best, as from what we can see, end-to-end user experience for WebRTC content. So it's not to say that, okay, yeah, Citrix is going to work in this space, because there are still factors like what's the endpoint running? Are you doing client-side caching? What's the where is Teams hosted? What is the solution that you're using in the back end? Are you using voice as well in that as well? So there's lots of different components that need to be factored in. What I would suggest is that you really explore what the solution is you're trying to achieve. So if, for instance, you are saying you want to be able to have this experience that we can see today in a virtual session, you need to start asking questions about where are your users going to be located. And if they're located in branch offices, there are solutions that can improve that functionality end to end. But then if they're home workers, then how are we going to guarantee that? Well, there's no guarantees, but there's solutions that can improve it, bring in resiliency, they can bring in prioritization of traffic to make the most of that bandwidth that the users got. But then you're still not guaranteed. When you're talking about optimization, it's very, very difficult to say, yes, this is going to work. And what I'd always say is we need to come back to is an assessment of some sorts to say, this is what we've got on paper and this is what we're working with. So it's very difficult to answer, but what I would say is Citrix have got the solution that say we work with all of these vendors and we're doing our utmost to support this as best we can.
Yeah, it's always going to be the toughest thing you'll do is full screen high definition video inside a virtual session, because you've got to fetch, decode, re-encode, send down the pipe, squeeze down the pipe, unencode, or decode again. So anything that can be done in Citrix and Microsoft both have technologies that will offload Teams with a bunch of caveats, because as we know, we're still not there for a full experience there for Teams. We've both got, Citrix have one and we've got one coming for media as well. So if you're watching a YouTube video, we can fetch that locally and decode it. But it's still the biggest challenge, to any desktop delivery. So I would suggest almost setting the expectation that it is never going to give you the best experience with your end users, and to give them alternatives, to if you need to see this video in the highest definition possible, we recommend using it in your local browser, because you're going to crank up the CPU on the virtual desktops. You're going to give other people. So it's almost just being realistic about it, that it isn't quite there at the moment, but I in the future I think we will get there as these technologies kind of become de facto.
It's one of our biggest focus areas, I would say, from product management, because Teams has just gone bonkers over the last years, with suddenly millions and millions and millions more people working remotely. So I've put a couple of links in there to make sure, some of our official links. Funnily enough, there's another article from James Rankin, which is another 7-page encyclopedia on the real fine-grained detail of it. But yeah, the key thing is, what we're trying to do is offload as much as possible to the endpoint where it works. That does reduce your loading cloud as well, which can reduce your cost. It is not fully feature the equivalent to local install teams. But there's new things, new capabilities coming out. Multi-window support has just been announced or is in tech preview. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening. Alex said in Chromebooks, Mac devices. So it is very, very heavily looked upon and being developed. I've got one of my biggest customers, big multinational bank. We have a weekly call with our product development, Microsoft product development, the customer. There's bugs being fixed, weekly. It is huge. So it's a little bit of a watch this space. But what I would recommend is have a look at those documents I've just shared. Make sure there's 4 or 5 different components. Your Workspace app, your receiver, your VDA, your gateway, all need to be at the right level to make sure you're really getting the best possible experience. But what you should get, if all those things are in place, you should be getting a peer-to-peer connection between your users. So you talk about problems on the LAN, you shouldn't be getting that. That should be working for you. So let's make sure that you're absolutely getting the best of what's possible, and then we'll try and make that what's possible better as quickly as we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Danny. I think we're 10 minutes over our scheduled time. So what we might do is collate some of the questions that have been asked in the chat and then send them out maybe as a sort of answer. We'll distribute them amongst who's probably best to answer it. So firstly, thank you to all of the people that we've had on the call today. It's been a great attendance. I hope you all enjoyed your breakfast, and thank you for staying with us for the session. Hopefully we've given you plenty of information to go away with, start scratching your heads and start thinking about what you kind of want to talk about in your organization, and giving you enough to maybe come back and say, actually, we need some more information around that, or can you help us out in those kind of areas. Obviously we'll be available to answer some of those questions as Bytes, and we constantly get people like Danny and Toby involved in the discussions that we have with our customers. So thank you to everyone who's joined the call. Thank you to our speakers today, Chris, Danny, Toby, and Pete. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. And I'll speak to you all shortly.
Thanks all.
Cheers.